You don't feel the shift right away. It's subtle, like someone turned the volume down on her voice, or the warmth left her eyes just a second too early. She still replies, still smiles, still says she's just tired, but something's different. You know it, and you hate that you know it. So you tighten your grip. You text more, call more, suggest one more night out, one more talk to clear the air. You become present, overly present, because you're afraid that if you disappear, even for a moment, she'll forget you exist. And here's the part that wrecks you. She doesn't stop you. She lets you do it. She lets you pour yourself into the silence she's creating. Because part of her knows she doesn't feel it anymore, and part of you refuses to accept that. You believe your consistency will fix it. But the more you try to convince her to stay, the less she sees you. The more available you become, the more invisible you feel. You're showing up more than ever, and somehow, that's when she starts to emotionally check out. It's not logical, but it's real, and no one teaches you this part. No one tells you that women don't fall in love with a man who texts good morning every day without fail, or the man who explains his love in paragraphs and bends his boundaries to prove he's worthy. They fall in love with the one who doesn't beg, with the one who notices a cold shoulder and leaves, the one who doesn't argue with confusion, doesn't negotiate his value, doesn't chase someone who's halfway out the door. He doesn't storm out. He doesn't slam anything. He just walks, not in anger, not in pain, in clarity. That's what shocks her, because she expected drama. One last plea, a desperate, tell me what I did wrong. Instead, she gets silence, and that silence speaks louder than any closing speech ever could. You didn't leave to make her chase you. You left because something inside you said, this isn't love anymore, and I love myself enough to stop pretending it is. That's the moment it flips, not in her logic, but in her nervous system. The man who wouldn't leave now haunts her because he did. The one who tried to fix everything with effort suddenly becomes unforgettable not for what he gave, but for what he stopped giving, because your disappearance was clean, not noisy, not messy, no guilt trip, just a dignified retreat. And that dignity, that quiet power, it doesn't get replaced. Let's be honest. How many times have you begged for someone who has already gone emotionally? How many times have you tried to prove you're not like the rest, while slowly becoming someone you don't even recognize? How many times have you confused love with sacrifice? The Stoics warned us about this. Epictetus said, don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. In other words, don't talk about your worth. Don't defend it. Don't ask someone to see it. Live it. And sometimes that means leaving when staying feels easier. Because if love requires you to shrink, to chase, to beg, then what you're fighting for isn't love. It's fear. Fear of losing her. Fear of being alone. Fear of not being chosen. But here's the twist no one tells you. The moment you stop needing to be chosen, that's when you become unforgettable. So here's the question. Are you still trying to be the man she falls in love with by proving how loyal you are, even when it costs your peace? Or are you becoming the man she can't forget because you walked away the moment she stopped treating you like someone worth remembering? If you're honest, you already know which one you've been. But the good news is the script can flip, not by convincing her, but by choosing yourself. Because women don't fall for the one who sacrifices himself to be loved. They fall for the one who had the courage to leave, when it would have been easier to beg. There's a reason this dynamic plays out again and again. Why the more you give, the less she values it. Why your kindness doesn't land. Why your presence doesn't earn you presence back. It isn't that she's cold or cruel. It's that something deeper, something invisible, is governing attraction. And once you start chasing from a place of fear, you're no longer standing where desire lives. Let's call it what it is. You're seeking safety, not love. You're hoping that if you're consistent enough, available enough, forgiving enough, she'll finally see you. You think your loyalty will rewrite the script in her mind, that it'll override her confusion, her hesitations, her emotional absence. But she doesn't feel your love as strength. She feels it as desperation. You've turned yourself into a symbol of security, of effort, of proof. And that's not what stirs her. Because attraction isn't logical. It's visceral. It lives in the body, not the brain. She doesn't calculate how good you are and fall for you mathematically. She feels something or she doesn't. And when you overextend, overexplain, overcommit, it's not that she doesn't notice. It's that she doesn't feel pulled toward it. There's a quote by Carl Jung. What you resist not only persists, but grows in size. The same applies here. The more you resist her fading interest, the more it consumes you. The more you try to reverse it, the more it defines you. Until eventually, you're not even responding to her anymore. You're reacting to the fear of being left. And when your choices are driven by fear, they're no longer masculine. They're reactive, out of alignment. In Stoic terms, you become a slave to externals. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you'll find strength. But in relationships, most men do the opposite. They give up that power. They outsource it to the mood of a woman, to her level of interest, to whether she texts first or texts back or changes her tone mid-conversation. You begin adjusting yourself not based on values, but on her fluctuations. You abandon your own center to orbit hers. This is where you lose her, not because you weren't good enough, but because you stopped being rooted. You stopped being a man she could feel grounded around, because you started spinning, too. Desire, especially in women, responds to gravity, to stillness, to inner weight. The moment she feels you clinging to her approval, your energy gets lighter. She can't rest in it. She can't trust it. You become emotionally weightless. And so she pulls away, not out of malice, but because biology tells her this man is no longer anchored. And here's the paradox. It's often your deepest vulnerability that leads you here. You just want to be loved. You just want to be seen. But the way you go about it, through self-sacrifice and pursuit, ends up betraying the very thing that would have made her feel something for you in the first place. Your self-respect. Seneca said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." What greater adversity is there than loving someone and not being chosen in return? And yet, this is the very moment that can either break you or build you. If you let it consume you, you become the man who chases ghosts, who lowers his standards, who romanticizes crumbs, who says, "I'll take whatever version of you you're willing to give me, just don't leave." But if you meet it with presence, if you face the pain directly, without story, without flattery, without excuse, you discover something rare. You don't need to beg to be loved. You don't need to bend to be seen. You don't need to abandon your center to be chosen. You were enough when you stood in your truth, unapologetically, when you didn't react, when you didn't chase, when you didn't negotiate your value just because someone else forgot to see it. Nietzsche once wrote, "He was a why to live can bear almost anyhow." The Stoic man finds his why in his values, not his validation. He remembers who he is when someone forgets him. He reclaims his worth in silence, not in pursuit. And that's why women fall for the one who leaves. Because leaving is not weakness, not when it's done in calm, in clarity, in alignment. It's a form of self-respect, of masculine restraint, of understanding that not every emotion needs to be indulged, not every moment needs to be explained, and not every goodbye needs to be delayed. You don't have to storm out. You don't have to prove a point. You just have to remember, the one who walks away from being devalued becomes the one remembered. And in that decision, you're no longer reacting to her. You're responding to yourself. There's a strange kind of erosion that happens to a man who stays too long where he's no longer wanted. It doesn't show up all at once. It begins in the subtleties. Your tone softens, not out of love, but out of fear. Your posture bends a little more. You start explaining yourself when no one asked. You over-apologize. You try to earn your way back into a space you never should have had to earn in the first place. And you don't even realize you're doing it. At first, it just feels like effort, like being a good man. You tell yourself it's mature. That love takes work. That if you just give a little more, she'll finally notice you the way you've always noticed her. But something quieter is happening beneath the surface. You're slowly giving your power away, one tiny compromise at a time. What begins as care becomes attachment. What starts as devotion mutates into self-abandonment. And worst of all, it's dressed up in noble language. Loyalty, persistence, selflessness. You call it love, but it's fear of being left unloved. And this is a trap. Because the more you lean in, the less magnetic you become. Not just to her, but to the world. You're not grounded anymore. You've handed the key to your peace to someone else. And she can feel it, whether she admits it or not. She senses it every time you look for reassurance in her eyes. It's not just unattractive, it's unsustainable. The Stoics call this the error of investing your well-being in externals. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Your mistake wasn't loving her. It was letting her reaction determine your value. You made her uncertainty your problem. You tried to soothe her indecision by giving more of yourself. But here's the part no one tells you. You can't love someone into clarity. And the more you try, the more you blur your own. You become emotionally bankrupt, overdrafting your identity just to keep her from walking out. It doesn't just change how you show up in that relationship. It rewires how you operate everywhere else. Suddenly, you're quieter in rooms where you used to speak up. You start doubting yourself in moments where you used to be decisive. You seek permission before expressing your truth. And then, without even realizing it, you begin shrinking from life. Because your center is no longer inside you. It's orbiting her. And every man who's been there knows the cost. You start to feel bitter. But you hide it. You try to be understanding. You become overly nice, overly patient, overly accommodating. And yet, none of it seems to work. In fact, it makes things worse. Because what you call love begins to feel like weakness. And worst of all, you feel it too. You lose respect for yourself. You look in the mirror and something's missing. Not because she left, but because you did. You left your strength behind, your boundaries, your silence, your gravity. And now you're exhausted. This is a consequence of staying too long in a dynamic that doesn't feed you. It doesn't just break your heart. It distorts your character. And still, part of you clings. You think, if I stop now, everything I gave will be wasted. But that's your ego talking. That's your sunk cost fallacy. You think persistence will redeem you, that if you just endure the discomfort long enough, the story will turn in your favor, that she'll wake up one day and realize you were everything. But she won't, because even if she did, she wouldn't respect a version of you that stayed despite being disregarded. Here's where Stoicism slaps you awake. You don't get points for emotional endurance. You don't get rewarded for staying where you're no longer celebrated. You don't earn admiration by being the most agreeable, available, self-sacrificing version of yourself. In fact, you lose everything that once made you magnetic. You lose apatheia. The Stoic ideal is serene detachment, the ability to remain internally unshaken regardless of what storms rage around you. Instead, you become a man who's constantly measuring his worth by someone else's moods. And here's the thing about that kind of man. He starts showing up that way in everything. Not just love, business, friendships, life itself. He starts overreaching, over-explaining, overthinking. He doesn't lead. He reacts. He becomes emotionally domesticated. And it all began the moment he thought, maybe if I just show her how much I care, she'll stay. But women don't stay for proof. They stay for presence, for energy, for depth. And when that's gone, when you've stretched yourself thin trying to be enough, there's nothing left to feel drawn to. That's the quiet tragedy. Not that she left, but that you lost yourself while trying to make her stay. The longer you stay in this loop, the harder it becomes to recognize yourself. Not because you become worse, but because you become hollow. Your strength is still in there somewhere, but buried beneath layers of unspoken pain, overcompensation, and self-doubt. This is why walking away isn't always an act of giving up. Sometimes it's an act of returning. To your spine, to your silence, to your weight, to the man who doesn't beg. Not because he doesn't care, but because he refuses to lose himself in pursuit of someone who never really saw him. Here's the moment it breaks. You wake up one morning and realize you don't even miss her. You missed the version of you that existed before you started bending. The version that didn't check your phone every 10 minutes. The version that didn't rehearse messages in your head like they were auditions. The version that didn't mistake anxiety for attraction or silence for punishment. And that's the rebellion. It doesn't start with revenge. It doesn't start with cutting her off or changing your number or flexing on social media. It starts when you stop performing. When you realize that you've been auditioning for a role that requires you to shrink. That no matter how well you play the part, it was written for someone who doesn't exist. That's when something ancient and immovable stirs inside you. A voice you've silenced. A boundary you've ignored. A kind of dignity you forgot you had. Not the kind that yells. The kind that stays quiet when it could speak. The kind that says, I'm done explaining why I'm enough. That's when you start breaking the cycle. Not with force, but with clarity. Let me be clear. You don't win her back by pulling away. You don't become magnetic again by going silent with the hope she'll reach out. This isn't a tactic. It's a transformation. You stop needing anything from her at all. You no longer chase her energy. You build your own. You stop texting to get a response. You start speaking because you mean what you say. You stop trying to be a good man in her eyes. You become a powerful man in your own. That's the Stoic way. Epictetus taught. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Translation? Define who you are, then live like it's non-negotiable. This is the part no one teaches men. You don't need closure. You don't need validation. You don't need her to explain why she lost interest. You need to stop giving pieces of yourself away just to keep someone from leaving. Because even if she stays, you're no longer whole. So how do you break free? You detach, not from her, but from your expectations. You don't expect her to recognize your effort. You don't expect her to text back. You don't expect her to meet you halfway. Because none of that defines who you are anymore. You let go of needing to be chosen. And instead, you choose yourself every damn day. You stop chasing closure, in her words, and start finding peace in your silence. You stop imagining what it could have been, and start building what it's supposed to be. Without her, you reclaim your energy. Every ounce of attention, every thought you wasted on maybe one day, you pull it back in, and you direct it somewhere else. Your body, your craft, your work, your mission, your presence. Because the truth is, when you stop orbiting a woman's approval, the entire axis of your life shifts. And something changes in the way people see you. You walk slower. You speak less. You listen more. You don't have to prove you're powerful. You just become so undeniably rooted that no one questions it. You don't chase attraction. You become attraction, not in a loud, performative way, in a calm, gravitational way. The kind that says, I've seen myself fall apart, and I rebuilt, brick by brick, without needing anyone to clap. That's what women feel. That's what the world respects. You're no longer trying to win her. You're too busy winning yourself back. And yes, she might notice. She might reach out. She might ask how you're doing after months of silence. But by then it won't matter, because you'll be too far gone. Not out of bitterness, not out of ego, but because you finally remembered what you forgot, that your value doesn't increase based on who sees it. It exists whether she acknowledges it or not. The rebellion isn't rage. It's self-possession. It's looking at the version of you that begged and thanking him for trying, then burying him with grace and letting something new rise. Someone who doesn't explain. Someone who doesn't beg. Someone who doesn't need to be understood in order to stand tall. You don't have to be the one who pleads. You don't have to be the one who waits. You don't have to be the one who breaks his own heart to protect someone else's comfort. You could be the man who walks away, not to prove anything, but because you refuse to lose everything. This is how the world changes around you. Not when she loves you back, but when you do. There's a moment after the silence, after the distance, after you finally stop checking if she saw your story, when something unexpected happens. You stop needing her to remember you, because you remember you, not the man who clung, not the man who waited for a sign, but the man who chose peace over performance, clarity over chaos, self-respect over self-abandonment. And here's the part they never tell you. That's the version of you she'll never forget. Not because you were louder than the others, but because you were quieter, still, unshaken, gone, not to punish her, but to return to yourself. You see, the most haunting presence isn't the one who sends one last text, pouring out everything he wished he had said. It's the one who said nothing at all, who left with his head high, his silence intact, his soul clean. That kind of absence isn't empty. It's full of everything she didn't see until it was no longer standing in front of her. And now she feels it, not in her mind, in her body, in her sleep, in the quiet moments she can't explain. She doesn't remember what you wore or what you said the last time. She remembers how it felt to be seen by you. And now that it's gone, she can't replicate it, because what you gave wasn't just attention. It was a mirror, a reflection of everything she forgot about herself. And now that you've left, she can't unsee it, but she can't reach it either, because you're no longer available to be reached. And that is the ultimate shift. You're not waiting for her to call. You're not secretly hoping she snaps out of it. You're not using self-respect as a strategy to get her back. You've outgrown the version of you that needed to be needed. You've moved from wanting her love to loving your life without her in it. That is stoicism, not coldness, but control, not indifference, but inner power, not detachment from feeling, but from outcome. Viktor Frankl once wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." You couldn't change her love. You couldn't force her interest. You couldn't fix the slow withdrawal of her affection, but you could walk. And you did. You didn't run. You didn't plead. You just chose to stop being someone she could ignore, not out of punishment, out of presence. Because once a man has seen the cost of betraying himself, he doesn't do it twice. And now you become something rare. Not a man she's trying to decode. Not a man she's trying to manage. But a man she can't reach, because he no longer lives in the emotional basement she left him in. You live above it now, not in some fantasy life, but in the one you rebuilt, with new standards, new purpose, new gravity. And from this place, you finally see it. You never needed her to love you back. You just needed to stop loving her more than you loved your own peace. Because love, when it costs your wholeness, isn't love. It's addiction dressed as devotion. It's fear pretending to be loyalty. And that's the wound stoicism teaches you to close. Not by hardening, but by holding yourself where others dropped you. By standing still where you used to chase. By saying no when you used to whisper please. There's a calm that arrives after that kind of evolution. And ironically, that calm is the very thing that made her feel safe in the first place. That steadiness. That quiet. That anchored presence. But now, it's not being offered. It's just there, and she can only feel it in your absence, because the man who begged, he's gone. And in his place stands someone she doesn't know how to replace. Someone who didn't try to win her. Someone who didn't fight for what wasn't mutual. Someone who walked, not for attention, but for truth. That's why she thinks of you now. Not because you made the loudest impression, but because you made the cleanest exit. No explosions. No drama, no campaign for closure, just presence, then absence. A man who didn't need to be understood to stay in alignment with himself. That's the man who becomes a symbol, not just a memory. A symbol of what she lost, of what she couldn't control, of what she didn't expect to miss until it was too late. And whether or not she ever says it, whether or not you ever cross paths again, it doesn't matter. Because this story isn't about her anymore. It never was. It's about you. You reclaiming your center. You returning to your standard. You walking out of the fire with dignity instead of ashes. This is what stoicism looks like when it's lived, not read. It's not about ignoring emotions. It's about refusing to be ruled by them. It's about finding stillness while everything in you wants to scream. And then making the hard choice not to stay, not to beg, but to rise, quietly, fully, finally. And when you do that, When you truly choose yourself without the need to be chased, you don't become cold. You become unforgettable.